Hey all, it's Matt, your average gamer. This build allows us to turn into the Fume Knight in Eldenring. The Fume Knight is an iconic boss from Dark Souls 2 and is one of the more difficult foes of the series. This is a powerful build utilizing Guts Greatsword and the Cleanrot Knight's Sword. The concept here is simple. We'll be using the Guts Greatsword with Eruption in our main hand and the Thrusting Sword in our offhand. This will mimic the Fume Knight's weapons. We will also be adding Bloodflame blade on a heavy Guts Greatsword to replicate Phase 2. During Phase 2, his sword lights up and the Bloodflame blade can give us the exact look for the Fume Knight's main hand weapon. This is a really fun and semi-challenging, powerful, but not completely overpowered build for Eldenring. We'll be going over the armor set and where to get everything as well. We are using the Knight's Calvary set, and then we have the chain gloves on to kind of give us the best look for the Fume Knight on top of our weapons to basically get as close as possible to the Dark Souls 2 iconic boss, Fume Knight. On another note, if you see any links in the description below for ExpressVPN, it's the awesome VPN service I've been using lately. There's also a link for Amazon too, and any purchases made through these links support the channel out. Once again, thanks everybody for the support so far. It's been fantastic. Also, for how I sound, apologies there. I'm still running a little bit of a cold or sinus infection that I had the past week. I am getting better, but it seems to be slowly. Hopefully within the coming days, though, I can get my energy back, we get some more builds up, and continue to do some fun stuff, including upcoming challenges and lore videos. We're going to go over the concepts of how to fight with this build, but as far as what we're using here, Eruption is going to be the Ash of War, and it's going to be our main focus, getting as much damage as we can with the Ash of War, and then using charge attacks with the Greatsword in a combination with the thrust attacks in our offhand with the Cleanrot Knight's Sword. And though he got his hits in at the end there, we ended up getting Radahn fairly easily in just one try. This is on New Game Plus 7 as usual, and I can't wait to show off this build. Probably one of the most fun ones I've done lately. And again, it's really cool to go back and look at Dark Souls 2 and the Fume Knight. First off, where do we get the basics? The first thing is, and I'll show it on the map here, is the Knight's Calvary set. This can be found by the double Knight's Calvary boss fight in Consecrated Snowfield on this area of the map, the part that I'm showing here. We also use the chain gloves, and they can be found at the first church of the game, sold by Merchant Kale. He's going to be the first merchant you ever run across in the game, and he's going to sell the chain mail set, and then you'll use the chain gloves to replicate the Fume Knight look from Dark Souls 2. Next up is the Guts Greatsword, which you can get in Caled. This is found in a carriage when you're heading northeast towards Dragon Barrow. Go left from Rotview Balcony, past the group of zombies, and you can grab this fairly easily. Now beware of these dogs. If you want to dispose of them first, it's not a bad idea, but they are relatively difficult at times depending on your build and setup. Keep in mind though, if you run away from them, they have long aggro ranges and you won't be able to open the map for a little bit to travel. And there it is on the map there. I'm showing it right there. That's where the carriage is in Caled. That'll get you Guts Greatsword, one of the best colossal weapons in the game. And we're going to be using Eruption, which I'm going to show you in a second where to get that too. But you can never go wrong with the Guts Greatsword, even if you're just starting out. It's a fantastic colossal weapon. Now, where do you get the Ash of War we're using? Eruption? You can get that in Volcano Manor. Knight Bernal, who's in the back room to the left, will sell it to you after you've done the initial assassination request. I believe you do have to do one. Once you get this done, the Ash can be purchased from him. This item is also fairly easy to obtain, and I'll show it on the map here in a second. Right in Volcano Manor, after you get the key, go to the back room to the left, and you'll find Knight Bernal. There he is, Volcano Manor, and you'll nab Eruption. Lastly is the Cleanrot Knight's Sword. This will give us a good thrusting sword for our offhand. The earliest place to grab this is in the middle of the swamp in Caled from the Cleanrot Knights who wield it. This is either a 2% or 4% drop rate, somewhere in between there, so it can take a minute to get. Luckily, you only need one to replicate the Fume Knight and do this awesome build. There it is on the map there in Caled. Time to get fighting. First up, aside from our Radahn intro, was the Magma Worm. Now the Magma Worm has some fire resistance, but since we're using heavy affinity, we can still hit him quite hard. Main concept here is to use Eruption as much as we can while mixing in heavy attacks and occasionally our offhand weapon. This is precisely how the Fume Knight fights, and Bloodflame Blade looks especially cool when doing heavy swings, as this can mimic his longer swings during his Phase 2. The Fume Knight is such a cool boss, and certainly one of my favorites from the Souls series. If only we could get the Fume Ultra Greatsword back. It really would be awesome if we could ever get that sword back, maybe in DLC. That would be a great add to Elden Ring in my opinion, and it was a ton of fun to use in the Soul series. The Fume Ultra Greatsword was truly an awesome colossal weapon. Main concept that you should focus on here is getting as many Eruption Ashes of War as you can, because you're going to get a lot of damage from it. It does leave the pool of lava on the ground. Again, he's got a little bit of fire resistance, so it's not going to do too much to him, but you can build up some posture damage. We are using a colossal weapon with a fairly good Ash of War, especially for slower enemies in Eruption, and there we go with the posture break. We can take advantage of that, get some extra hits in, and then finish off the Magma Worm with ease. And there goes the Magma Worm. That's the end of that fight, and we're going to take on a whole bunch of different bosses upcoming, including the Dragoncrest Sentinel, Morgott, Golden Shade. We've got some good stuff here and how to utilize this build. Next up, things get challenging. Now this is New Game Plus 7 as always. I think I mentioned that earlier. The hardest difficulty we can get to, being that everything has max HP. The Dragoncrest Sentinel ends up beating me up pretty good here. So there's one issue with the Ash of War Eruption. It's incredibly slow. Bosses and enemies with high poise attacks make it difficult to get to the entire animation, to basically get through the whole animation of the Eruption Ash of War. Since before this video I never really used Eruption, I had to learn when to place it and where. This resulted in me getting hit fairly often, as placing the Ash of War at the right moments I found a bit difficult. It's not a bad Ash of War per se, but it is slow and it doesn't have a ton of range. Lava pool isn't even that big either, and the Ash seems to scale mostly with weapon level above everything else. Even so, using this in a combination with Bloodflame Blade, as well as our offhand thrust-hitting attacks if need be, can take down any foe with a little bit of patience. The Dragoncrest Sentinel would eventually fall, but after a very tough battle. But keep in mind, when you're using Eruption, it may take a little time to get used to the specific Ash of War, given the animation it has, and the fact that you're using something that doesn't have a ton of range either. It can still be a lot of fun. It can be a lot of fun using this Ash of War in combination with the fact that we also have Guts Greatsword. You can mix in heavy attacks and jump attacks for substantial damage. We're strength invested, and we are in heavy affinity. Alright, now that we're getting to the end of the fight, just going to mention, as far as the rest of this video goes, everything's timestamped, by the way. We're going to take on a couple more bosses, then we're going to fight mobs, go over NPC invaders and such, what to do with them and how good Eruption is against them, and then go over equipment, stats, buffs, everything you need to turn your character into the Fume Knight from Dark Souls 2. Here's a clip of a tree avatar, the one in the capital. This is where it absolutely shreds because they're weak to fire damage and they have slow attacks. This means we have the perfect balance and can use Eruption as many times as needed, and it wouldn't take too many to quickly dispose of the capital tree avatar mini boss. He gives you a Lord's Rune, by the way, which can be useful earlier on in your journeys. Any fire damage against the tree avatars in the game is bound to absolutely shred through their HP, given the fact that they take additional fire damage, so using Eruption here is your best bet, in combination with Bloodflame Blade for a little bit of fire damage on there. You can absolutely destroy any of the tree avatars in the game with the Fume Knight build and setup very easily. Golden Shade was another challenging foe. His moveset specifically made it difficult to pull off the Ash, as charge attacks were a little bit easier. Thankfully, he doesn't have a ton of HP, so disposing of Golden Shade is usually not too many hits with whatever Ash of War or weapon you're using. Even so though, Eruption was difficult to time here too. As I found myself getting adjusted to the Fume Knight way of fighting, I often took extra hits I wouldn't normally take. This was just adjustment though, and to be fair, the Ash of War is incredibly fun to use. It was fun using something that's viable, but not super overpowered, and led to some challenging fights as you can see here. Guts never disappoints though, so having that is a big bonus. If you're new, it's an amazing greatsword and colossal weapon with a ton of range. It has a good amount of reach because it's just so big in general, and it does a lot of damage and heavy affinity. It scales quite well too, and it mixes in well with what we're using here, the Ash of War Eruption. Now, as far as getting in different attacks, I recommend if you struggle a little bit with Eruption, you can mix in jump attacks, and as we mentioned, going for charge attacks is a good option too, because you're going to get a lot of damage with Guts Greatsword and heavy affinity on those charged attacks. If you can get an Eruption though, the pool of lava and the damage it does itself is by no means bad, and you can take on bosses that way too. And there we have it. We disposed of Golden Shade, and we're going to be going on to face Morgott. We're going to go over mobs, NPC enemies, a whole bunch of different stuff. And as mentioned, everything is timestamped in the description below. Alright, on to Morgott, as it was also a tough fight, although ultimately not too bad. Using the Shackle always makes for a great start and easily allows us to get in some extra hits as the Fume Knight here with our style of play. Morgott is quick, so this can be an issue for a slower Ash of War, but he has low fire resistance, and we do have guts after all. On another note, by the way, if I haven't mentioned this, I think I mentioned this once, if you're following to this point and you're enjoying Elden Ring, definitely hit that subscribe button. I'm going to continue to make fun and engaging content to keep the game interesting. And if you have a build request, join the Discord, and there's a chance it may get turned into a cool video. And we did get the posture break here, and the fight's going to end shortly after this. You can get some posture damage, by the way, from the Ash of War Eruption. It doesn't do a ton, but it does a decent amount. In combination with that and charged attacks, you can usually get a posture break throughout a fight if you're consistent about it. That could end up leading you to victory. Usually when you get that posture break, you can add additional damage. A lot of the bosses in the game have those long critical hit windows, so you can usually hit them like once first, then get in your critical break, do a lot of damage in the combination of that, and end up ending the fight quickly after you finally do get that break. Godskin Noble was a side boss I fought to get into Volcano Manor. I ended up using the convenient shortcut that you can get through in the Academy, where you end up dropping down in the lava and going around that way. Initially I used sleeping pots, but got tired of them really quickly here, no pun intended, and would opt to fight the second half of the battle head on. He's got decent fire resistance, but we are in heavy, and we can combine thrusting attacks with the Eruption Ash of War and Bloodflame Blade. Also put the Cleanrot Knight Sword, and I mentioned this earlier, in Blood Affinity because it still gives us a C in strength while giving us 84 bleed with minimal arcane investment. This can allow you to get a proc or so throughout the fights, combining it with Bloodflame Blade on the Guts Greatsword. Godskin Noble can be a pain in the second phase because he can end up doing the thing where he rolls around, and if everybody remembers, if you're around for launch earlier in the game, it was definitely shorter, or at least I recall it being shorter, and now it seems to go on a very, very long time, and even if he hits you, he'll continue going. If I recall, he used to hit you and stop, but now it just keeps going on forever. But if you hide behind one of these pillars, just like in the dual boss fight later in the game, you can completely not worry about that at all and continue the fight and take advantage of the windows afterwards. You can do a lot of damage, as both the Godskin Noble and Apostle can. They do have a good amount of DPS, but they do give you enough windows to get in your hits too, and using Eruption here, we're able to get that off as well. And the lava will consistently damage him, even if it's only by a little bit. And down goes the Godskin Noble. We're able to take him on with a combination of Eruption, Thrusting Sword, and then obviously Bloodflame Blade as well. NPC enemies, by the way, can be crushed with this, although again, it does take timing and patience, as well as being up close to get the most out of the skill. The first clip I did exactly this, but the second clip I end up getting beat up a little bit. You're going to see this in a second. As pulling off our timing with the Ash of War can be a little bit difficult with the NPC invasions, because they move rather quickly, and again, we have that long animation in the Ash of War Eruption. Even so, he'd go down fairly quickly, but he definitely got his hits in, no doubt. You do pull off Eruption against NPC enemies like these ones though, it does feel good because they are quick, it can stun them, and it can do a lot of damage when you get the slam down and then the follow-up attack on top of the lava that lays there and can continue to do more damage to them. And down goes the NPC invader. Not too bad there. Eventually he did go down to the Ash of War Eruption. Now mobs are another story, as they're fairly easy when using the combination of Guts Greatsword and the Ash of War Eruption. Essentially stun lock most enemies, as you're going to see here in a short bit with the Ash of War, and won't have to worry too much about them. Plus we do have Guts Greatsword, so we're going to be hitting them really hard too. You can use a combination of charged attacks, regular attacks, and jump attacks to do a lot of damage. Fun way to dispose of mobs and regular enemies, as you'll be hitting them extremely hard. By the way, a quick thank you to YouTube and Discord user Foxy Woxy, who came up with the concepts and items for this build. This one was a really good time. Although shortly I'm going to go over equipment, stats, everything you need to know. Keep in mind, all of the items are in the description below, so if you're ever in a rush Or if you just forget things along the way or don't want to take notes, you can always look at the description where it has everything listed that you'll need, each individual item. Everything's pretty much mapped out there for you to create the Fume Knight from Dark Souls 2. Of course, this is the Eldenring version of the Fume Knight, and we don't have the Ultra Greatsword, but I think we did a really good job replicating it, turning basically Guts Greatsword into the Ultra Greatsword with Bloodflame Blade, and then having the thrusting attacks as well. This was a solid and fun setup. Let's get into buffs. For buffs, we go with the longer duration stuff here, so we're going to drink our tier first, which has the Fire tier in it, and the Faith tier so we can do buffs. Golden Vow. Then we're going to use Flame Grant Me Strength, then you can fill up your FP. Then you can use Bloodflame Blade. And then we have that awesome Ash of War and Eruption. Then you can do charged attacks, those big swings like his animation in the second phase. And you can use the thrusting attacks in the offhand. Let's get into equipment. For equipment, we have Guts Greatsword and Heavy Affinity with the Ash of War Eruption. We have the Clean Rot Knight Sword, any Ash of War, preferably one that does thrusting like Impaling Thrust works. I think Blood Tax was the one that was suggested. Blood Affinity, Knight's Calvary set, Chainmail Gloves, Shard of Alexander, Erdtree's Favorite +2, Fire Scorpion Charm, Dragoncrest Greatshield Talisman, the Fire tier, and the Faith tier. Let's get into stats. For stats, it's a strength build, so we're capping this at 150, and we got around 65 strength to do a lot of damage with Guts Greatsword. And then we have 60 vigor, because the Fume Knight would have a lot of vigor, and a good amount of endurance too that really fits the theme there. You can see the stats there. If you continue leveling, level up more in strength. If you guys enjoyed becoming the Fume Knight in Elden Ring, as you can crush foes with a Bloodflame Greatsword and offhand thrusting attacks, just like the boss himself. This was a fun way to continue enjoying the greatness of the Dark Souls series in Elden Ring. If you're not on the Discord, definitely be sure to join the Discord. You're not going to want to miss out. There's over 500 people in there. It's been an awesome growing community, so definitely join that community. And if you're not subbed and you love overpowered PvE builds or fun builds, content in general, definitely be sure to check out all the builds that are on my channel. There's like an entire library there now. Thanks for watching. As always, I will catch you guys there.